Welcome back, Snickers. We are back for another movie ranking. Today, I will be ranking every live action Superman film from worst to best, starting from Richard Donner's Superman to James Gunn's Superman. If you want to know my thoughts on the DCU debut, I do have a review on the film live on the channel now. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts outside of today's video, feel free to go check that out. Starting off with the number 8 spot, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. I only have one positive thing to say. I am quite appreciative of the hour and a half runtime because this was a really hard film to get through. I'm going to be honest when I say this. Superman 4 is one of the worst films that I have ever seen. I mean, come on. Superman's single strand of hair is thrown in the sun, and out comes a full-grown man. And don't even get me started on Lex Luthor's annoying nephew. This isn't also the dumbest Superman movie, but this is the most forgettable. This is a movie that I never want to lay eyes on again. Knowing me, I probably will. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace does actually have promising ideas, but with terrible execution. The characters are annoying and everything else is so forgettable. The direction of the film is just baffling to me. So that is why I give the movie a 2 out of 10. Moving on to the number 7 spot, Superman 3. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush with this one either. This movie was terrible. It wasn't funny when it was trying to be. The action was meh. The acting was okay. And it kept on dragging and dragging. The whole idea of the evil Superman was eh. Now, there's a way you can do that sort of Superman, right? I mean, just look at Man of Steel or the Injustice games. But also, going back to Man of Steel, you see how they ruin that and things like Justice League. So, there you have it. But the reason why I thought this movie was so bad was because it was never clever. Now, I just found out who Richard Pryor was before I watched the film, and from the sounds of it, they just shoehorned him in there just for the sake of doing so. Really, it's just more of a Richard Pryor film that features Superman. And maybe if I didn't even know he was such a big comedian, then maybe I wouldn't even feel that way. Superman 3 was an idiotic film that was barely better than the fourth. Every choice and character development in here doesn't line up with the first two movies. It wasn't funny, and was at times boring. So with all that being said, I'm going to give the film a 3 out of 10. Now for the number 6 spot, Superman Returns. This movie wasn't terrible, but I didn't think it was good either. Where to start? Well, first off, the movie was way too long. It did not need to be 2.5 hours at all. The film started to drag in places, and I eventually just lost interest in the film. I did find it interesting how this movie is canon to Superman and Superman 2, but it essentially dismisses Superman 3 and 4. This is obviously better than the latter, but I don't think it had the magic they were trying to replicate. The original movie was charming and hopeful, but after watching Superman Returns, it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I wasn't a fan of Lois Lane's kid, who turns out to be Superman's son, and she essentially lies to James Marsden's character. So really, I just didn't like Lois Lane in this movie. And I also wasn't a fan of how they showed Superman just being pummeled by some other guys. I mean, yeah, there's definitely ways you could do that right, but they didn't do that very well in this movie. I contest that Superman Returns could have been a good film, but it was a pretty bad Superman movie. The film tends to drag in places, and some plot points didn't even need to be included. The actors did a good enough job with what they were given, but I wasn't a fan of the direction those characters went. So with all that being said, I'm going to give the film a 5 out of 10. That then puts Superman 2 in the number 5 spot. Now, before I started watching the Richard Donner movies for the first time, I had low expectations for the original. As you'll hear in a moment, the film exceeded my expectations. However, the expectations that I had for the original were met here in the sequels. The film was a lot more cheesy at times, but I still thought it was able to carry the same weight that the original does. So at the end of the day, I still enjoyed the film. I had fun with it, but at the same time, parts of the film weren't exactly for me. I find myself going back and forth on how I feel about the film, but at the end of the day, I give Superman 2 a 7 out of 10. There's some fun to be had, and the beacon of hope that is Superman still shines. However, at times it's a bit too cheesy with some parts that I just wasn't a fan of. That then brings us to the number 4 spot, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Now, from my understanding, Batman v Superman is a very divisive film, even more divisive than Man of Steel, but I actually enjoyed it. I thought Ben Affleck was a great Batman, but I wasn't as much of a fan of Superman in this one compared to Man of Steel. I mean, so many years later, it's baffling to me that they killed Superman in their universe's second movie just to bring him back not that long later. Don't even get me started on Lex Luthor. Jesse Eisenberg is a good actor, and it wasn't even a performance issue, it's a direction issue. I didn't mind him as the antagonist of the story, but he was also a terrible Lex Luthor. All being said, I thought it was a fun enough movie that has some interesting things going for it, for sure. When whenever the aspect ratio changes, like the nightmare timeline for example, that's the stuff I enjoyed the most. That was my sign that Zack Snyder was about to cook. So at the end of the day, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is a fun enough film. It moves in a very questionable direction, but it also has some really interesting things going for it. Ben Affleck was my favorite part of the film. So for a pretty mixed and divisive film, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Moving on to the number 3 spot, Richard Donner's Superman. Now, I just recently watched this film for the first time, and I was blown away. The film came out in 1978, and I thought it was just going to be a fun, cheesy 70s movie. But it didn't. But I didn't expect to love it as much as the movies I love that came out today. Yes, it can be dated, but coming out of this movie, I now think of it having less of that 70s cheese and more of that 70s charm. The characters were all so charming, and I can now fully understand how important Christopher Reeves is to the genre. He gives such a great technical performance. He is the reason why the movie is so special today. In today's environment, it's really important to have movies like these. Christopher Reeve's Superman stands for truth, justice, and the American way. Now the character has changed into truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. So even though this movie stands for something different, he still makes the same impact decades later. My one complaint is, again, the movie will of course feel dated, especially with the VFX, but that's quite easy to look past. Superman is an all-time classic that still shines in today's environment. It's fun, charming, and hopeful. I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed the film and how it can still exceed expectations decades later. So with all of that being said, I give Superman a 9 out of 10. Now for the number 2 spot, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. Now I understand that this movie is quite controversial, but I believe that the change in tone was for the better. It's a 180 from the original, but they're still both amazing. The world building in Man of Steel was so cool. I love what they established with Krypton and the Kryptonians. That first flight sequence was awe-inspiring in a way that you wouldn't expect, and that embodies what I love about the film. Again, it's a darker version of the character, but I believe that the basics of the character still shines through. Henry Cavill's Superman still gives hope, and so does Christopher Reeve's Superman. They just do it differently from each other. The one gripe that I had with the film is that Amy Adams' Lois and Henry Cavill's Clark had zero chemistry. But there weren't a lot of scenes in the movie where their chemistry wasn't necessarily important. But when it is, it's not there. It's not apparent. Man of Steel is a complete 180 from the original film, but the core of Superman is still there. He still embodies hope and stands for a better tomorrow. The action is awe-inspiring, and the sci-fi aspect and Kryptonian world building was awesome. However, when it's needed, Lois and Clark's chemistry just isn't there. So that is why I give the film a 9 out of 10. And ladies and gentlemen, the number one spot, James Gunn's Superman. First things first, if you want to hear my more elaborated thoughts, again, go check out my review posted on the channel. Now, I don't only think that this is the best Superman movie, I think this movie is the best casted. David Cornsweet is Superman, Rachel Brosnahan is Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult is Lex Luthor. Those three give generational performances. The chemistry is amazing as well. I mean, one of the best couples in a comic book movie ever. It's up there. I also love the supporting cast of the film, of course, but the best thing I take away from this movie is how it made me feel. The movie is filled with so much joy, and you will be smiling ear to ear once you leave the theater. I'm still just so happy thinking about it. James Gunn's Superman is filled with so much hope, joy, and fun. It's action-packed, and a comic book come to life. I think some people might have a problem with the film being overstuffed with ideas. I don't know. That's a thing, I guess. And I even thought it was jarring at times. I will give it that. It could be more jarring to general audience member, but for me, there's like a little couple things that's it. So with all of that being said, I give Superman a 9 out of 10. Just so you know, the score could always change. I'm going back and forth between a 9 and a 10 out of 10 right now. But for now, I'm going to leave it at a 9 out of 10. Because for just watching it one time, I don't think it's a perfect movie. But we'll see how I feel once I rewatch it. And that is going to do it for my Superman movie ranking. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch yet another one of my videos. I have a spoiler review of Superman on the way, so stay tuned for that. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know to come back to the next movie we'll be talking about. The Fantastic Four First Steps. So until next time, stinkers, bye-bye.